Hello, welcome everyone to Star Trek from the Holodeck. I am Michael, your captain of the USS Rainman Digital, and on the bridge, navigating the stars for us, is Lieutenant Junior Grade David.
Hooray, I'm Lieutenant Junior Grade.
Oh, Jesus. You are Boimler, you know that, right?
Yes, I am.
If you would be if you were to be remade as a cartoon and thrown into Lower Decks, that's absolutely who you would be.
Well, the only difference I think is I would have actually embraced. Actually, hey, we want to play games. Cool, let's do it.
No, the only difference is that you're Filipino and he's white.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to be talking about Season 4, Episode 5, titled The Empathalogical Fallacies. I enjoyed this episode.
My God, dude, yeah. This was actually
quite a bit, actually. I mean, Lower Decks coming in with probably one of the more consistently funny episodes straight through from beginning to end. This episode felt more in line with what they were doing during Seasons 1 and 2.
Yes.
Where it's not just a few fragmented, funny, perverse moments. It was just funny throughout. Just nonstop laughter from beginning to end. While also not forgetting what it is, which is a piece of Star Trek.
Yes.
A piece of a IP that has been in existence now for over 5 decades, and you're going to have to adhere to certain core principles and tropes, and absolutely they do so in this episode with those deep cuts from TNG.
Yes.
You had the Betazoid Xanthi fever.
Yep.
And you had the Vulcan Bindi syndrome.
Bindi syndrome.
Both of which are, in fact, very deep cuts that were originally introduced in Star Trek The Next Generation.
And I think in here in Lower Decks, not only was the comedy on par, but they were able to take those elements of, you know, dealing with Bendai syndrome and dealing with the Xanthi fever and giving us a story that also had a decent theme to it, which was about mental health, mental awareness. Mm-hmm. And using those elements that for a lot of Star Trek fans are very near and dear to their heart. I mean, the Bendai syndrome, when they brought up that, I remember those episodes with Sarek and Picard and TNG, and those were emotionally packed episodes.
Oh, yeah.
You know, nothing, that whole episode is seared into my brain with like Picard crying that he never got a chance to tell Spock that he loved him. And it was so emotionally charged and jam-packed while also telling a story of how, like, holding in your emotions, that was the negative of Sarek. Here, they took it even a step further. They took those emotional beats and kind of made it more universal, telling people, hey, this is what happens when you aren't mentally aware. Your emotional awareness or your mental awareness also affects those people around you. And this was kind of like a really interesting way of doing that theme while still maintaining your lower deckness.
Yeah. Having those notes of levity for sure.
Yeah.
Well, not notes, entire songs. Songs of levity. Yeah. So the synopsis for this episode, the hedonistic outlook of Betazoid delegation affects the crew. The episode was directed by Megan Lloyd and written by Jamie Loftus. So just to clarify a few things for listeners out there that may not be aware what the Betazoid Xanthi fever is. Xanthi fever is a virus that affects the empathic abilities of older Betazoids. It's basically menopause.
It's menopause.
Yeah, and it causes them to project a certain emotion onto those with a concealed tendency to feel that emotion.
Yes.
An example of this is when the crew of Deep Space Nine became attracted to various other members of the crew when Loxana Troy had Xanthi fever. And then the Vulcan Bendai syndrome. Is that how you pronounced it? Bendai?
Bendai, yeah.
For some reason, I was thinking it was Bendy, but I think you might be right. The Bendai syndrome was a very rare degenerative neurological illness affecting Vulcans over the age of 200.
Almost treated kind of like Alzheimer's. It was like Vulcan Alzheimer's.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. Yeah. A dangerous side effects of the Bendai syndrome was that the loss of emotional control could be telepathically projected to others. Vulcans were able to resist the emotional projections, but if the afflicted person was in the presence of non-Vulcans, the emotions could cause outbreaks of anger and violence. And in the case of Lower Decks, sexuality, crazed antics, depression.
Maybe it's saying something about T'Lyn. She's so repressed.
No, I love her. She's become one of my favorites. I just
mine too.
I love the Vulcan characters. I always have. So to see them finally introduce that character on Lower Decks just makes the series feel that much more complete.
Yeah.
Now both of these were cleverly utilized, the Xanthi fever and the Bendai syndrome, to turn the Cerritos into an absolute circus. And in doing so, we get an episode that follows the classic TNG formula that ends with quite a bit of character growth, or at the very least, some much needed insight into our new Vulcan lieutenant.
Yes.
And I gave this episode points for using T'Lyn as the episode's perspective. In a lot of ways, it was the familiar episode where we see, or the classic quintessential episode where we see our Vulcan crew member adjust to life on board a ship with mostly humans.
Yeah.
We've seen this now numerous times. It's almost like a rite of passage at this point for our Vulcan characters.
Oh, yeah.
And this typically allows the viewers to learn more about their struggles, and in the case of T'Lyn, her struggles and what she is contending with. It's not just about adjusting to her new circumstance, but also a bit of a reconciliation and introspection as it pertains to who she is. That's why this episode really worked for me.
Oh, yeah.
She feels like something is wrong with her because she's not Vulcan enough. This is why she was punished and sent to the Cerritos.
Yes.
It's this frustration that initiates the problems in the episode, the ensuing heightened emotional circus, if you will. Circus.
And I thought that basically her story being paired with story B was so well done, because story B just helped accentuate those themes that T'Lyn was going through. You know, the feeling of, I don't know what's going on. You know, in a chaotic environment, you're adjusting to a new life, essentially, like T'Lyn was. And you see that in story B with Boimler adjusting to what? A new lifestyle that is very chaotic to him. And it's not what he perceives, but taking those emotional tones and pairing it up with T'Lyn made T'Lyn's story much more impactful.
Yeah.
Especially when you get to the very end. And that's why I thought was really interesting. I mean, one of the things that after I watched this episode, I'm like going, they've tried to do many a times a story like this in Star Trek when it comes to the Vulcans. We saw it in Voyager with Tupac.
Who's Tupac? Tupac was in there?
But they tried to do it with Tuvok with him going through Bendai syndrome. It wasn't Bendai syndrome. It was some other neurological disease that he was dying of.
Yeah.
And like,
wait, maybe it was Bendai syndrome.
Maybe it was. I'm not too sure about that.
But you're right. He did have an illness that was supposed to affect his
mental capacities.
Yeah, his capacity at a decent life moving forward from that point. Yeah.
And I think, you know, this might sound sacrilegious to a lot of Voyager fans, but I think T'Lyn's story is done more maturely, being talked about how mental awareness, mental health, treating it like that.
I think you're not wrong, Dave, and I don't think it's blasphemy. Unfortunately, and maybe we should put together some shows for Patreon to discuss this in further detail, but Tuvok was just an unlikable character.
Yeah.
I mean, let's just be completely honest about it. He was militant.
Very.
Without a lot of redeeming qualities. Like, he had all of the Vulcan annoyances that I love, but without the redeeming, softening aspects.
Yeah, he was more.
It wasn't until the final season when Neelix left the ship towards the end that he finally became the Vulcan that I like. Well, that I could like.
Yeah.
When he allowed because it felt weird, this hatred that he had towards Neelix.
Neelix, yeah.
Like, he had this aggression where he just despised him. In fact, wasn't there a fantasy episode where he murders Neelix?
He murders Neelix. And it was, I remember that.
I wanted to like Tuvok. I really wanted to like him. And there are episodes where they really used him well. So the writing itself wasn't the problem. It was just the way they shaped his character. I didn't really care. I felt like his
likability was unfortunately not as
he was
established.
He was like T'Pol was for the first 4 episodes of Enterprise.
Yes.
You're like, okay, I don't really like you, but I understand what they're trying to do here. She moved past that. Yeah, whereas Tuvok stayed in this bizarre rut
for a majority of Voyager's run.
Yeah.
Where it's like, that Tuvok's going to be logical and sarcastic. That was it.
Yeah.
And, anything dealing with Neelix or any chaos would easily upset Tuvok.
Right. And that's why, David, I say, no, it's not blasphemous, what you said about T'Lyn. I would agree that this episode, though it was funny in its design, had a lot of value there. It had a lot of merit when it comes to the more serious side of Star Trek. You just have to look past its humorous veneer.
Quirkiness.
Yeah.
I call it quirkiness.
Yeah. So the Betazoids were used as misdirection because as we find out, it's actually T'Lyn and the Bendai syndrome that caused this entire fiasco. But it was pretty cool what they did with the Betazoids. For one, just like they did in the last episode with the Orions, I liked that they actually showed another side of the Betazoids. I totally dug the introduction of the BIA, or the Beta Z intelligence.
That was so funny. And I like the fact that basically they not only did they show a different side of the Betazoids, but they still embraced who we know of the Betazoids.
Right.
Like Beta Zeds, that's probably the proper term, is Beta Z.
Yeah.
But the Beta Zeds, we've always been introduced to them as characters who are, let's just say, overly sexualized, especially with Deanna Troy's mom.
Well, their culture is somewhat hedonistic.
Hedonistic, yeah.
It's about pleasure, yeah.
And that's the thing that I really did enjoy, that they embraced it, but just like we said, they showed a different side of it. They showed that they can be taken seriously.
Yeah, because
they should be taken seriously.
Isn't that, I mean, maybe I'm just a weird Star Trek fan, but I've always wondered about that type of thing. I'm like, well, okay, there's got to be more to this culture than simply they like to have sex and they walk around naked for their wedding.
For their wedding.
There's got to be more to it than that. And of course, I understand that they use it for whatever reason in those episodic formats in the original TNG era of Star Trek. I get it. I understand. Star Trek isn't designed to just delve into every species and every culture. You just can't do it.
Yeah.
However, I appreciate that Mike McMahon can take something like the Beta Zeds and flesh it out just a bit. Obviously, there's not a lot of time to do a lot of groundwork, but still, just the simple inclusion of the BIA.
Well,
they actually have something to their culture besides just hedonistic value. They have an intelligence.
Yeah.
They have an intelligence agency. That means they actually are aware of what's happening in the galaxy, because as we know, their mission was to find out or uncover the mystery behind the mysterious ship that has been initiating unprovoked attacks. So we know that they're actually aware of the galaxy outside of their own hedonistic world.
Yes. And that's the thing, is kind of like, as much as I know there are Star Trek trolls out there that want to crap all over the new shows, If you look at Lower Decks,
are people still doing that, David? Because I just ignore them now.
I
wasn't even aware they're doing it still.
But I know that they're still there because they just don't disappear. But I'd like to point out to all those haters of Lower Decks has done more for a lot of the alien races.
Little things. The forgotten things. The things that have slipped through the cracks.
And they've brought them out. They brought them forward, and they've actually made them more relevant to the overall universe of Star Trek. They've done that more than some of the other shows in classic TNG and classic Star Trek shows. They've done more pushing forward the narrative and the quote unquote character development of some of these character races in these past 2 episodes with the Orions and now the Beta Z. If you even want to take it even further with Lower Decks, they made the Pac-Leds look threatening. How is that possible? But Mike McMahon figured out how to do it.
Pac-Leds.
Think about it, Mike.
It's the perfect villain for this show.
It's the perfect villain for the show.
Perfect villain for this show.
And if you look at all the shows, Lower Decks is one of those ones that has been willing to embrace all the different types of alien races that are out there. They've brought in Pac-Leds. They've brought in Orions. They've brought in Beta Zeds. They brought in some of the AI races. They brought in Klingons. You name it. Some Star Trek series, we are lucky enough to get maybe Klingons, and that's it.
Yeah, I take your point, and I agree. That's the reason why I continue to watch this show, because as I had mentioned during our discussion, I believe for the first episode of season 4, I was just a little unhappy because I just felt like, okay, this is just rinse and repeat jokes. But these types of elements particularly in the last 2 episodes, episode 3 and 4, I mean, that's really why, or I should say 4 and 5, is really why I continue to watch this show. It's for those little moments where they take things that have fallen off the back of the wagon during its 50-year journey, Star Trek, and fleshes it out, reminds us. It's not just about self-referential treatment. The show definitely does that. That's probably what it, if you had to point to one thing that the show can be defined as, yes, it's self-referential, but as long as we're given these little moments where they flesh out the world of Star Trek, like with the Orions, like they did with the Beta Zeds this week, I will continue to watch this show.
And they were still able, even with focusing on bringing in these new races, Mike McMahon and his writing team can still give off those one moment zingers that basically take you off guard, like the Romulan joke. The Romulan joke had me cracking up when they barely get past. They get away from the neutral zone, and then the Romulan bird of prey shows up, and they all go, "Oh, okay, let's go creep over into this sector over here." And I'm going
something about we'll go lurk elsewhere.
Lurk elsewhere. I was
like that. I started laughing because that's pretty much what the Romulans did in TNG. They were always just, cloaked, lurking in some random place. Like, why are you there, bro?
Why are you there? And it's like that when he's able to do that and then still give us these really in-depth pushes in narrative when it comes to the alien races, it's a testament to the strength of this writing team.
Yeah.
Because they know what they have to do.
Yeah. They know the assignment.
Yeah.
I also appreciated that they connected the myth arc at last to the Cerrito crew itself, because so far it's just been this, I guess you could say
going back and forth.
Yeah. And it was a little bit of a narrative thread. Just was out in the ether. Wasn't really directly connected to any said episode storyline, and now it's been effectively brought into the main storyline because of the Beta Z connection. it introduced this threat now to the Cerritos crew, which I'm assuming now moving forward, there's going to be a lot more interaction between the Cerritos and
this
that mysterious ship. Do you have any clue or theories as to what it is? Reasonable theories, David, not tinfoil hat moments.
Amazingly,
it's cute, a ship.
All of a sudden, now that you said it, watch, it'll happen.
That's so dumb.
But like, honestly, that's the one thing that surprised me. I mean, usually Star Trek fans will speculate up the wazoo who it could be. This is the first time that I've ever seen where people are really quiet about it, because especially when we get a chance to finally see the haziness of the ship. Mm-hmm. It's a ship we've never seen before. It's a brand new looking ship, meaning it could be a brand new race for all we know. And I think that's what the excitement that some fans are looking into Lower Decks as is like, we're seeing things that we didn't think we'd ever see. But not only that, Mike McMahon's able to bring in new things. And just like what me and you have harped on for Star Trek for the longest time, whether it's Lower Decks or Picard or anything, push your universe forward. If you can introduce new things, that's fantastic. You're giving us something new to talk about. And that's what I'm actually really hoping for. I'm hoping, Mike, that this villain is something brand new. For me, the only worst thing that it could be, and some people have been pointing it out, is it's another AI. It's another AI robot of some kind.
Yeah, well, that seems to be the consensus online. I've just been sorting through some of these theories just right now as you're talking.
Which, I mean...
And it seems like people are leaning into Peanut Hamper.
Peanut Hamper. It could be Peanut Hamper and Badgie.
And Jeffrey Combs.
Playing
playing one of those. Didn't he play an AI already?
Yes.
Yeah. So it might be one of them. People have mentioned that they're locked up, but listen, they can easily escape.
So like, and Lower Deck seems to embrace the whole AI villain. I mean, some of their best villains by far are AIs. Badgie is one. Badgie's probably the number one villain that they've ever
Badgie has a good heart, though.
Mike, he wants to kill things randomly.
He wants to kill his father. I mean, come on.
That's not good.
I think we've all been there at one point. Son of a bitch.
But overall, that's what I'm hoping for. I hope that it's something new. Yeah. I don't want it something to be like a deep cut of some Star Trek.
Yeah, let it be exclusive to Lower Decks.
Let it be, exactly. Let it be something exclusive to Lower Decks.
Yeah. So overall, the episode was just filled with humorous moments. I liked the ransom stuff the best.
I knew you were going to bring that up.
I just thought it was fucking hilarious.
I'm sorry, when he started hitting on the Beta Z and the Beta Z turned him away and he started crying.
I can play hard to get.
And then later on, he's talking with his one bro.
Yeah.
And he's like going, she turned me down. And he's crying. And I'm like going, oh my God, this is Ransom's inner thoughts.
I also like the T'Ana stuff. She is ferocious.
And the fact that her and Shax are a couple.
I know. I have to see her in live action. I want to see her in live action. I really dig the Doctor as well. It's something I don't really get into too much in this show.
It's those characters, man. All the Doctors are fantastic characters in Star Trek.
Yeah, she's cantankerous, and that's why
the fact that she wanted to eat them, you find out, and that's
they used to eat Beta Zeds.
They used to eat
Beta
Zeds.
Yeah,
and you do realize she's also a one-off alien race that we've never seen before.
That's right. That species was introduced in Lower Decks, right?
Yeah. And I'm like going, that's what I mean.
There was a cat character, if you remember, in Star Trek V. Then she attacked Kirk.
She attacked Kirk. Yeah, that's true.
It might be a different cat character.
Might be a different character.
I'd have to go look.
But
I feel like we've talked about this. Doesn't it deja vu? Isn't there some deja vu here, or is that just me?
I think that might be just you.
Oh, okay, so maybe we haven't. I'll have to look it up for our next discussion to make sure.
But she's also one of the characters that is a standout for Lower Decks. I mean, in all the seasons, not even in this season. Mm-hmm. I still say the standout to me. And that's why I'm happy that me and you seem to be on the same page as, oh my God, the Vulcan character.
T'Lyn.
T'Lyn.
Yeah.
I was about to say Ta'an, but that's the Doctor. But Talin has actually been my standout because I've been so happy to see this logical character taking a look at, and this is their perspective of this chaotic crew. And she's getting up there. I love the fact that basically she's very standoffish with a lot of like the other crew members, and all of them want to be her friend.
I would want to be your friend.
That's the thing. Is like,
let's go make some sweet panfar together.
And like, I can picture her as like, she's like constantly just trying to get away from us.
I'd be like, I can play hard to get if you want.
I can play hard to get.
All right, David. So I'm going to give this episode an 89%.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I actually have it as a 90. It's one of my favorite episodes this year or this season, because like, also I like the theme, them tackling a theme about like mental awareness. I think it was done smartly, and it wasn't like a box standing on a soapbox thing that normally people do when they do these type of theme episodes. It seems really kind of what's the word? It's ill-conceived.
Yeah.
This feels like it was well thought out, tied well to the story,
but also not taken overly serious,
and not taken
knowing what
serious.
This show is. Yeah,
because I think that's also the vibe they want you to have when it comes to mental awareness. Hey, it's no big deal. Don't worry, you can get through this type of mentality.
Yeah. All right, this brings us to the end. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Thank you, David.
Thank you. Live long and prosper.